everyone, welcome back. Tonight we set aside the noise of the day and step gently into another world. Before we begin, if you find peace or meaning in these quiet journeys, feel free to press like or subscribe. It gives me strength to continue bringing these stories to you. And in the comments, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you now. I always find it comforting that though we live in different corners of the earth, we gather here together in this moment. Now take a breath. Dim the lights. Let the soft hum of a fan or the quiet stillness of the night become your companion. Rest your mind, and together we will wander slowly into the past. Into a time when survival itself was an art, and each day was uncertain. Tonight, we drift into a world that feels distant yet strangely familiar. The year is 1325. Imagine the silence of dawn across a medieval village, broken only by the toll of a heavy church bell. The air is damp. The ground slick with dew, and smoke from last night's fire still lingers, faintly scratching the lungs of those who breathe it. A hut stands in the dim morning light. Its walls lean slightly, its roof patched with straw. Inside, a family stirs awake. They do not wake to comfort. There is no alarm clock with a gentle chime. No steaming cup of coffee waiting on the table. No warm sheets to wrap around their bodies. Instead, there is a straw mattress, damp with moisture, uneven, alive with fleas. The woolen blanket that covers them has not been washed since last winter. It carries the smell of sweat, smoke, and animals. As the family rises, the bell continues to echo. It does not ask, it commands. The hut is a single room. It houses not just people, but chickens clucking softly in the corner, a pig snorting in its pen, and the unseen scurry of rats. Privacy as we know it is a modern invention. Here every sound, every cough, every cry is shared. Children rub their eyes, their feet cold against the packed dirt floor. Even at such a young age, they already know their tasks. Water must be fetched, firewood gathered, animals fed. Childhood, in the sense of play and wonder, does not exist here. Childhood is duty. The walls breathe smoke. A single small window, if it can be called that, lets in only a dim gray light. The air is thick, heavy with the smell of damp wood and livestock. This is not a place designed for rest. It is a place designed to withstand survival. The morning begins without ceremony. No one asks how anyone slept. No one complains about the hardness of the bed. In fact, it would be strange to call it a bed at all. It is simply what exists, a pile of straw, flattened, reshaped, and infested. There is no alternative. To complain is pointless. To accept is necessary. As the father stretches, his body is already weary. Muscles ache not from yesterday, but from years of labor. His hands are calloused. His back bent slightly forward from plowing fields since boyhood. The mother, her face lined by years of smoke and sun, stirs the coals of the fire, preparing to warm the pot. She is already calculating what little food is left, what can be stretched to feed everyone, how much will remain for tomorrow. The children, though still small, are not idle. One pulls on a tunic that smells of earth and sweat. Another carries a small wooden bucket, already knowing the long walk to fetch water. Their faces show no complaint. There is no room for it. Complaining will not make the water closer or the bucket lighter. Life here does not bend to desire. It only bends to necessity. The church bell continues. Its clangor does not merely mark time. It defines it. In a medieval village, time does not belong to individuals. Time belongs to God and to those who enforce His order. Each sound of the bell is both a call and a command. Rise, work, pray, rest, repeat. A rhythm as unyielding as the earth itself. Inside the hut, breakfast waits, if it can be called that. A pot hangs above the hearth, filled with the remnants of yesterday's pottage. Thick, gray, and unappealing. A stew made from grains, root vegetables, and whatever scraps could be found. Meat is rare. Sometimes a piece of cabbage floats, sometimes a bean, sometimes nothing but oats and water. The smell is faint, but it is all there is. The family crouches together around the fire. Each takes a small portion, eating in silence. There is no chatter of plans for the day, no idle talk of dreams or hopes. Eating is not joy, it is fuel. barely enough to sustain bodies that must work from sunrise to sunset. Hunger does not disappear. It only waits. It lingers in the belly, returning again before the day has ended. As the pot empties, the day begins in earnest. The father picks up his tools, worn smooth from years of use. The children gather buckets and sticks. The mother, after clearing the bowls, turns again to her endless cycle of duties. No one asks if they are tired. No one speaks of rest. In this world, fatigue is constant, like the presence of smoke in the air or fleas in the straw. It is part of life, as ordinary as breathing. The hut, small and crowded, does not empty even when the family leaves. Animals remain. The air remains. The silence is never silence, for in the walls are creaks. In the straw, the movement of insects, and in the distance, the bell rings again. A reminder that the day has only just begun. The morning meal arrives without celebration. There's no golden bread, no sweet butter melting into its crust, no dark roasted coffee filling the air with warmth. Instead, a pot hangs over the hearth, filled with the remnants of yesterday's pottage. Pottage thick, gray, and endlessly recycled. A stew of grains, roots, and the small mercies of whatever could be found. Meat is rare, a treasure for feast days or unexpected fortune. More often it is nothing but oats, boiled until they lose all shape, leaving behind a flavor that tastes less like food and more like endurance. A wooden spoon scrapes the bowl. The children eat quietly, their eyes not on the food but on the fire. Eating here is not delight, it is duty. It keeps the body standing, the hands working, the breath moving. Hunger does not vanish. It lingers, whispering its return like a shadow that follows no matter where one walks. The family does not linger long. The father, bowl emptied, sets down his spoon and reaches for his tools. The wood is smooth from decades of handling, worn by hands that have known only labor. He walks toward the fields where earth waits hard and unyielding. There is no machine to aid him, no tractor to cut the soil, only muscle and will. Every furrow carved into the land is a conversation with survival. The mother tends to a different rhythm. She gathers wool, spins thread, stirs pots, feeds livestock, soothes crying children. Her work is endless, circular, invisible in its repetition. 1,000 tasks performed without recognition, each one necessary, each one forgotten as soon as it is done. Her body bends not only under weight but under expectation. And the children, though small, are not free. A boy barely 5 carries a tiny rake, his hands already rough from use. A girl no older balances a bundle of sticks on her back. There are no toys here, no lessons in letters or numbers. Childhood is not a season of play. It is an apprenticeship in survival. In the fields, the sun climbs slowly, but already it weighs heavy on the body. There is no shade, no cool water waiting in a bottle. Sweat soaks woolen tunics, stings eyes, mixes with dust. Heat stroke here is not diagnosed. It is simply misfortune. To falter is to fall behind, and to fall behind is to threaten the family's survival. As the day stretches, labor becomes the rhythm of existence. Each movement, digging, lifting, carrying, is not chosen but demanded. The body aches, but there is no pause. In the Middle Ages, rest is not a right. It is a risk. Illness waits at every corner. A small cut from a farming tool may swell, darken, and fester. A cough, harmless at first, lingers for weeks until the chest feels heavy as stone. A fever comes without warning, burning through the body, leaving sweat and shivers behind. In the Middle Ages, sickness is not a visitor. It is a constant resident. The air itself carries danger. Water, collected in barrels, is alive with insects, bird droppings, and algae. A single drink may send a person to bed clutching their stomach, praying to survive the night. To drink is to gamble, and the dice rarely favor the poor. Medicine, as it is called, offers little comfort. A wound may be treated with herbs or with prayers whispered over the skin. A fever may meet the cold edge of a blade, as bloodletting is believed to cleanse the body of bad humors. Leeches are applied, clinging and drinking while the patient lies still, hoping that weakness will pass. More often it grows worse. Doctors, if one can afford them, rely not on knowledge but on tradition. They balance humors, prescribe potions of honey, vinegar, or crushed herbs, and sometimes suggest pilgrimages. To recover is credited to divine mercy, never to science. To die is explained as fate or as God's will. Children are the most fragile. Many do not see their 5th birthday. A simple fever, a chill in the winter, a stomach illness in the summer, all can end a life before it begins. Mothers carry grief as constant as breath, mourning children even as they bear more. Women face another danger, childbirth. Each birth is both hope and gamble. Without clean tools, without knowledge of infection, without medicine to stop bleeding, many mothers never rise from the bed where they labored. To bring life is to risk death. For those who survive childhood, adulthood comes quickly. By 20, joints creak like old wood. By 30, teeth are lost, worn down by years of coarse bread and grit in the food. By 40, many are already considered old. To live past 50 is rare, a gift of fortune or wealth. The body is never free from pain. Toothaches, infections, fevers. These are companions of life as ordinary as hunger or cold. Pain is not unusual. It is expected. Religion shapes the hours as surely as dawn and dusk. The bell from the stone tower does more than ring. It draws borders around the day. It tells the village when to rise, when to kneel, when to stop work and bow their heads, when to grieve, when to rejoice. The calendar belongs to saints and fasts, to feasts that break long seasons of hunger, to quiet Fridays and bright Sundays. A child learns these rhythms before letters or numbers. Time is a liturgy. Within the small church, the air carries wax and smoke. Candles tremble, throwing meek light over worn benches and the patient faces of the carved saints. The priest's voice moves like a slow river, steady, certain, a language of duty and consolation. Neighbors stand shoulder to shoulder, their hands rough from work, their eyes soft with worry. They pray for rain, then for sun, for a harvest to arrive, and for sickness to pass by their doors. In a world that rarely offers explanations, prayer becomes a bridge, narrow but strong enough to hold a day's worth of fear. To be outside this circle is to be exposed. The church does not only hold worship, it holds records, vows, memory. Birth is noted, marriage bound, confession collected like whispers at the edge of night. A life can be measured by sacraments as much as by winters survived. Here the law of heaven leans upon the law of earth. Oaths sworn before God reach into fields, kitchens, and market stalls. The village is one body, and religion its slow binding breath. Yet beyond the village, behind stone and tapestry, the noble hall endures a different cold. The walls are thick, the windows narrow. Fires glow, but warmth hesitates. Servants cross the floor with careful steps, bearing trenchers and cups, tending the blaze that eats wood as quickly as hunger eats bread. A lord sits wrapped in fur, a lady in layered linen and wool. The small bright comforts of music or falconry drift in and out like sparrows, easy to startle, hard to keep. Feast days are heavy with meat and spiced wine, but even abundance can sour. One poorly kept cask, one dish pushed too long from the hearth, and illness moves through the hall as confidently as it moves through the barn. The noble sleeps under embroidered cloth, yet wakes to the same cough that visits the peasant hut. Stone protects against the wind, not against misfortune. Politics arrives like weather, seen from a distance, felt up close. Marriages are woven like nets, tight, practical, indifferent to love. Alliances shift, letters travel with sealed wax and dangerous promises. A smile lasts a dinner, a slight lasts a winter, a cousin pressed too near the inheritance, a neighbor lord who counts boundaries with a soldier's patience. These are the quiet tides that undermine even the strongest walls. A noble may dine by the fire and still taste ash. Safety is a guest who never unpacks. For noble women, duty is a house with many doors. There is the door of the storeroom, the door of the nursery, the door of the chapel, the door of the solar where letters are written and read. She balances accounts, keeps servants in order, acts as host, as diplomat, as patient keeper of long silences. And like her sisters in the fields, she meets childbirth as a sea that must be crossed without charts. She has midwives, oils, prayers, but not certainty. Bravery here is quiet and often unrecorded. Between altar and hearth, between plow and banner, life chooses the same verbs: to endure, to carry, to hope. The village kneels together, the hall toasts together, but the night meets each person alone. In that solitude, the same questions lift like smoke. Will there be enough? Will fever pass? Will tomorrow be kinder? The Middle Ages answer not with guarantees, but with custom, with ritual, with neighbors and names, with work that repeats until it becomes a kind of faith. Now let the distance between that world and this one soften. The room you lie in is warm. Water runs when you turn a small, bright handle. Light appears at your touch. The page you read does not smudge your fingers. If you cough, help is close. If you hunger, food is near. These are not miracles, but for most of history they would have been. Remember the hut with its single window where dawn arrived as a gray suggestion. Remember the church where breath and belief made a modest light in a dark interior. Remember the hall where fur and stone could not change the weather within a human chest. Across all of it, the same fragile thread. Bodies that ached, hands that worked, hearts that hoped. If you were carried there for a day, you might not last. But they did, and because they did, you can rest here now. Clean water by the bed, soft fabric under your cheek, a silence you can choose. Let gratitude be the blanket that warms you. Let the bell that once commanded become a distant, gentle echo. In your breathing, hear the long patience of those who came before. Close your eyes. Let the centuries loosen. Let fields and halls and narrow chapels fade to a quiet shore. What remains is simple, the human pulse, the small courage of ordinary days, the kindness we owe to one another. Sleep comes like a kind priest, like a steady fire, like a door set on its latch. You are here, and the night is long enough. Law is a loom that weaves order from fear. In the village, custom stands beside scripture. Oaths bind tighter than rope. A theft of bread can bring the stocks. A hand pilloried before the market where neighbors pass and do not meet the prisoner's eyes. Gossip grows teeth. Slander is punished with a gag of iron, a bridle that quiets the tongue and bruises the pride. For greater crimes, the earth itself is asked to judge. The trial by water, the trial by fire. A hand thrust into the flame and wrapped. If it festers, God has spoken. Truth is measured in wounds. Courts travel like caravans. The Lord's steward arrives with parchments and seals. Fines are tallied in coin and grain. Justice can be purchased, but never at a discount. Even mercy has a price. A poacher's rabbit becomes the Lord's rabbit. A hedge cut too close becomes a debt that grows through winter. In such arithmetic, survival must be careful and care must be silent. Punishment is theater, a play for a crowded square. The audience learns the script by heart. Transgression, display, humiliation, release, or not. Yet beneath harsh shows there is a quieter law, older than ink and wax. Neighbors who keep peace by memory. Mothers who settle quarrels with bread and water. Elders who speak in the shade where no seal can reach. This is the law that lets people sleep. The year is a circle carved by weather. Spring loosens the soil. Summer hardens it. Autumn counts what mercy remains. Winter remembers every debt. In this rhythm, a medieval village breathes. Each season is not just a change of light or air. It is a change of chances. Grain is a calendar you can hold, and hunger is time refusing to pass. Spring, a soft opening full of promises and worries. When frost retreats, the earth is not generous, only willing. Men and women step into the fields with tools that remember their father's hands. Seeds go into furrows like whispered prayers. Some are barley, the quick friend of short seasons. Some are rye, patient and dour. Some are oats, humble and loyal. The first green shoots look like hope in the shape of grass. But spring is fragile. A late frost can press its cold hand over a month's worth of labor. Too much rain turns paths into wounds. Too little rain leaves lines in the soil like unhealed lips. People watch the sky with a scholar's attention and a child's helplessness. Summer, the bright test. By midsummer, the fields have learned to speak. Wheat heads are heavy if luck has held, light if luck has not. Children walk the rows to scare birds. Their small claps a thin fence against clever beaks. The body learns many heats. Sun on the neck, fire at the hearth, fever that slips in at dusk. In the hay meadow, scythes move like patient handwriting. Each sweep is borrowed breath. Each bundle, a quiet commitment to winter. There is little shade. There is no pause. Milk sours quick, temper quicker. The strongest lesson of summer is this: abundance must be captured before it escapes. Autumn, counting the mercies. Harvest is a drumbeat that the whole village hears. Sickles flash. Backs bend. The air fills with the dry, clean sound of straw against straw. Grain falls like sand, irresistible and indifferent. The threshing floor becomes a small world. Flails rise and fall. Chaff lifts and drifts. Laughter appears in short, surprised pieces like birds startled from hedges. Every cart that creaks toward the barn is a sentence that ends in a period, firm and necessary. And still there is arithmetic. How much to keep, how much to mill, how much to plant again when the year turns. Autumn is not triumph. It is assessment. Winter, the long ledger. Cold is not simply temperature. It is a conversation the body keeps losing. Doors are shut. Smoke writes its diary along the beams. The family gathers closer to the hearth and even stories burn more slowly. Food becomes memory. Smoked fish, salted meat, apples that taste faintly of straw, onions braided like old friendships. Pottage is the metronome of survival. Thick on good days, thin when caution must rule. And always there is the little negotiation at each meal. Another ladle for the child who grew too fast. A smaller piece for the grandmother who says she is not hungry. Winter is where love learns to count. Hunger, not a storm but a hallway that narrows. Famine is rarely sudden. It begins with small edits. Loaves shrink. Crumbs are saved. Pottage stretches until it is almost a memory of itself. Salt becomes precious, then abstract. The mind changes, too. People dream of bread that never existed. Sweet, heavy, enough for everyone. Parents pretend they have already eaten. Children pretend they believe it. Markets grow quiet, not because there is nothing to say, but because there is nothing to trade. Even the church candles seem thinner. Causes, how a single season decides 3 more. A cold, wet spring. A hailstorm one afternoon. A blight no one can see but everyone can taste. These are the authors of a lean year. Grain stores depend on locks that mice do not respect. A broken millstone's delays flour by days that the belly cannot forgive. Sometimes trouble comes by road. A levy for war empties barns faster than rats ever could. Sometimes it comes by sea. A ship delayed means salt delayed, means meat spoiled, means a winter rewritten in harsher ink. Coping, the grammar of scarcity. Villagers know 100 small salvations. Bread made with peas or beans to stretch the wheat. Alla brewed weak but clean enough to drink. Herbs that warm the mouth so the stomach feels fooled. A hen kept back for eggs rather than meat because the future must also be fed. People borrow, and the borrowing is named charity if the lender is kind, interest if he is not. Work travels. A son goes to a neighboring manor at haytime. A daughter spins for a widow who has coin but no hands. Survival is a conversation held in doorways at dusk, where voices stay low and promises travel carefully. Rituals, the way hope is made visible. On regation days, they walk the boundaries, beating the parish lines with willow wands, singing psalms into hedgerows as if the earth could be persuaded. A loaf is blessed, planted on the first furrow, or crumbled for the birds so they will leave the barley in peace. Bells ring for rain and again for sun and again for the wisdom to accept whichever arrives. Ritual does not change the sky. It changes how long a heart can stand beneath it. A small story to carry like a charm. In a hard year, a girl of 7 counted kernels in her palm. 32. She planted them along the wall where the wind slowed, and she watched and waited and watered from a cup meant for her. Not all sprouted. Not all lived. But when the harvest came, her mother baked a small cake from the handful that did, and they ate it with the door closed. The room warm. The taste plain and perfect. It was not enough, and yet it was everything. The next year they planted the saved seed again. Sometimes history is just this. Not a miracle, but a memory repeated until it becomes safety. What the seasons teach. Spring says risk kindly. Summer says gather while you can. Autumn says reckon fairly. Winter says keep one another. The poor know these lessons by heart. The rich learn them when luck fails. And somewhere beyond the fields the year takes a breath and begins again. If you listen closely you can hear it now, steady asleep. In towns the sound of work is music. The ring of hammer on anvil, the soft rasp of a plane on oak, the steady thrum of a loom. Smoke curls from low chimneys. Doors stand open like mouths that breathe sawdust and steam. The street is a score of small rhythms. Shoe leather tapped into shape, iron persuaded into hinges, linen coaxed from thread into cloth. In such places, craft is not an occupation. It is a weather of hands. Morning in the workshop. Dawn arrives earlier indoors than out. Someone has banked the coals overnight. A faint orange remembers yesterday. The apprentice, smallest and newest, sweeps shavings into neat islands, feeds the fire, fetches water till the bucket's handle draws a red line in his palm. He moves with careful eagerness, trying not to disturb the tools that sleep on their pegs. Chisels like small moons. Awls like starlight. The mallet whose patient head knows every knot in the bench. He will learn their weights the way a singer learns breath. Apprenticeship. Learning the grammar of matter. An apprentice learns by repetition that never quite repeats. He threads the same bobbin, sharpens the same blade, cuts the same strip of leather, each time a hair finer, a whisper truer. He is paid in bread and shelter and knowledge weighed out slowly like flour. At the end of 7 years, or 5 or 9, time being measured less by calendars than by competence, he will have a chest of tools and a back that understands standing. Mistakes are costs but not debts. The master shows him how to hide a flaw within grace. Journeyman, the road bound with twine. When the day comes to leave, a journeyman wraps his tools in sailcloth, the way a pilgrim wraps relics, and he walks. He trades miles for methods. A joiner in one town shows him how to cut a dovetail that will not argue with winter. A dyer in another whispers the right hour to lift wool from the wode. He learns prices by listening and learns people by silence. His pay is coin, bed space in a loft, and the slow enlargement of his hands. A stamped letter from a guild hall, creased, cherished, turns strangers into brothers, masters, keepers of doors. A master does not own a craft so much as he keeps a door open to it. The sign above his shop is a promise and a warning. Quality within, standards within. He balances more than ledgers. Apprentices' tempers, suppliers' delays, saints' days that interrupt delivery. On his bench lies a half-made wheel, a near-finished shoe, a blade that wants an edge and persuades it gently. He knows the weight of a calm voice when heat climbs in the forge. He knows when to say again and when to say enough. Guild rules, fences that keep gardens from goats. Guilds bind strangers into kin. Under their banner, craft becomes a shared oath. They set the price of a loaf of skill, not too low to ruin, not too high to tempt pride. They test work with eyes that have seen everything, seams set, the honest weight of metal. They forbid night work on narrow streets for fear a single candle will cost a neighborhood. They care for widows, bury the fallen, loan to the unlucky, and scold the greedy. Admission is a ceremony with simple words. By these hands for this town under this patron saint. Marks in making, signatures without ink. Every craft leaves a name behind that is not letters. A carpenter's brace leaves a spiral inside the hole. A smith's quench leaves a temper that shows as pale straw, then blue. A weaver's selvage tells the loom it came from. On finished work, a small stamp lives near a seam, a lily, a fish, a star, so that if a hinge fails or a shoe bites, the road back to the maker is clear. Reputation is a glass container, useful, brittle, always at risk. A single cracked pot can empty a year. Women's work, visible and invisible threads. Not all making wears a signboard. At windows and doorsteps women spin, distaff tucked at the waist, fingers drawing wool into a line so even it makes silence feel uneven. In kitchens, Brewsters stir ale the color of late afternoon. In back rooms, silk workers tease light into thread. A wife keeps accounts with beans and with glances. A widow, if the guild allows and life insists, takes her late husband's bench and keeps the shop breathing. Tools warm under new hands. Labor does not ask which body carries it. It asks to be carried. Feast days when work remembers to sing aloud. On the patron's day, shutters close and hands newly idle begin another kind of making. Banners in borrowed color, loaves with saints stamped in the crust, songs that everyone knows and no one claims to have written. Masters in their best coats walk beside apprentices in their only ones. A procession stitches the streets into one long hem. At the guild hall, tables answer hunger with measured extravagance. Jokes travel faster than ale. Promises are made with more courage than prudence. In the corner, a tired fiddle proves that time has a back you can lean against. Disputes and peacemaking, how iron cools. Sometimes the market sours. A price cut too sharp. A rumor about watered glue. A customer whose coin is counterfeit in spirit if not in stamp. Tempers lift like sparks. The guild elders listen, pour water on the forge, and declare a settlement. Pride is fined in small sums, stubbornness in larger. What matters is not victory, but the town sleeping with its doors on their latches. A small story for the pocket. There was once a shoemaker whose apprentice cut 2 left soles by mistake. The master said nothing, only placed them on the sill. All day customers came and went. None noticed. At dusk a traveler limped in, boot worn thin on the left. The master sold him 1 sole, not 2, and took only half the price. When the door shut, he turned to the apprentice. "Learn this," he said gently. "A craft is not fixing leather. It is mending chances, what craft teaches. To turn raw into right is to practice patience that glows without heat. To work among others is to learn the weight of promises. To mark your making is to accept that someone will one day read it. And at night, when the street grows quiet and the tools breathe out, the town rests on what daylight built. Doors that close, cups that hold, cloth that warms, proof that skill, once given to the world, becomes a kind of shelter. When work loosens, the village breathes together. Musicians find a corner. Stories travel where bread cannot. A square that knew only feet hurrying to market now learns lighter steps. Doors are left on the latch. Smoke rises more cheerfully. Even the dogs sleep closer to the fire, as if the day had put down its burden for a while. The gathering. Strings of small preparations. A saint's day, a wedding, the end of harvest. Reasons gather like birds and then lift. Before noon, benches are dragged into the open. A trestle laid across barrels. A cloth spread that has seen many feasts and remembers them kindly. Children chase one another through the ankles of grown-ups. Someone chalks a circle on hard earth to be a dance floor, and a stage and a boundary all at once. The musicians, how wood and gut become weather. They arrive without announcement. A pipe like a reed of riverbank. A tabor whose steady hand gives the afternoon a spine. A fiddle that can make sorrow lean and delight sit up straight. The droning comfort of a hurdy-gurdy. Somewhere, a small bagpipe that sounds like winter learning to smile. They tune by listening to faces. The first tune is never bold, it is a door gently opened. People step through without quite noticing. The dances, shared maps for moving. Hands find other hands. The old dances do not need teaching, only remembering. A ring that widens and closes. A chain that braids and unbraids. A line that advances and retreats like tide on a friendly shore. Boots scuff dust into soft weather. A grandmother shows a child where the step turns. A boy counts under his breath. A young couple misses the beat and laughs softly, grateful that the tune forgives. Table and cup, hunger answered with measure. While at dark as late afternoon travels the circle, bread is torn. Cheese cut with a knife that has cut many things and never once complained. A goose appears and then becomes fewer, slice by patient slice. Spices, if any, are small comets, noticed, admired, gone. No one is full to pain. Everyone is fed to peace. Blessings are said without being named. Storytellers. Fire given a voice. As light tilts, a space opens near the edge of the square where sound collects kindly. An elder clears his throat and the village leans in. There are tales that fit in a palm, fox and crow, miller and coin, saint and storm. There are longer ones that loosen shoulders. The king who learned humility by being lost. The girl who bartered with winter and was paid in spring. Just travel faster than morals. Riddles take the long way and arrive with delight. A good tale behaves like bread. It fills, it keeps, it may be shared again tomorrow. Plays and masks. When the village borrows other faces. On some days the guilds put on a mystery play. A cart becomes a stage. A curtain becomes a sky. Heaven and hell are arranged with rope and paint and faith. Devils caper with bells on their heels. Angels remember their lines with the help of mothers at the side. Laughter is not unholy. It is merely honest. When the final amen arrives, people applaud with their whole bodies. Not because they were fooled, but because they were reminded. Songs that work, songs that rest. There are songs for scything and rowing, for kneading and carrying. Tunes that divide breath fairly among tired chests. But this evening has other music. A lullaby hummed by a doorway. A chorus that knows just enough harmony to tug at sleep. A call and answer that lets the shy sing anyway. Voices fray at the edges and grow sweeter for it. The last verse is always softer than the first, the way night is softer than day. A small story, kept in a pocket for lean times. Once, during a year that had too much winter in it, a traveling harpist came to a hungry village. He stayed 3 nights and took only crusts, and each evening he played a tune that felt like a room with a window. When he left, he said, "I carry songs, but you carry one another." That winter did not shorten, but it hurt less. What festivals teach. Work makes survival possible. Festivals make it bearable. Music does not change the weather. It changes how long we can stand in it. Stories do not add bread to the table. They remind the hands to share. And when the lanterns are snuffed and the square returns to its ordinary dust, something remains. An afterglow in the bones. A tune that keeps time with walking. A kindness that takes the long way home. Roads are sentences written across the land, some clear, some broken, many unfinished. In the quiet before dawn, a traveler tightens a bundle, kisses a threshold, and steps into the first word. Behind him, smoke names the weight of familiar doors. Ahead, distances that will teach him how to measure hope. Ways and waymarks. He learns the grammar of the road by touch. Ruts remember carts that passed in harder years. Milestones lean like tired shepherds. At crossroads, wayside crosses hold a hush in their arms. A coppiced ash bends like a sentence with too many commas. The traveler reads all this without letters. He reads wind. He reads mud. He reads the dry sting of dust that says there will be no water soon. Inns and shelters. The commas of a long line. An inn appears like a pause the road meant to make. Strawn aloft, a bowl of something patient and brown, a bench that understands aching legs. News travels faster than carts here. A bridge washed out upriver, a sheriff's levy on wagons, a fair 2 days ahead where wool buys more bread. Coins change hands, but so do stories. Each one pays for the other. Fords, bridges, ferries, small decisions with large consequences. The river is a scribe who edits plans. When it runs low, a ford invites feet. When it swells, a ferryman's pole writes a safer line. Bridges charge their toll in coin or in nerves. Some creak like old arguments, others sing under hooves. To travel is to accept that choosing a crossing will often feel like choosing a future. Weather, the other companion. Clouds earn their own heraldry. Rams is fleece for luck, anvils for thunder, a long gray cloak that means keep moving. Rain is not only wet, it is delay, it is a chill at the edges of thought. Dust is not only dry, it is thirst beginning its arithmetic. On some days the sun is a patient teacher, on others a strict overseer. Cloaks grow heavier with lessons. Pilgrims, feet that learn prayer. Some travel for trade, some for wages. and some because sorrow is too large for one village to carry. Pilgrims set out with reasons that do not fit neatly in a satchel. A vow made in a fever, a child's name whispered to a saint, a gratitude that refused to sit quietly at home. Shells, badges, and little lead tokens accumulate like footnotes pinned to a cloak. The road does not ask if belief is perfect. It asks if the next step is possible. Letters and protections, thin armor against the wide world. Folded in a belt pouch. A letter of safe conduct, a note from a guild, a scrap stating that the bearer walks for holy reasons. None of these stop weather or wolves. Sometimes they soften a gatekeeper's voice. Sometimes they buy a night under a roof that doesn't leak. Between law and kindness, a traveler learns to walk in the space where both try, and sometimes fail. Tongues, measures, coins. Beyond the next hill, bread changes shape and name. A pint becomes a pot, a penny becomes 3. The traveler learns to count with fingers and eyebrows. Smiles span borders better than oaths. So does the act of showing empty hands before asking for water. Dangers, the ellipses where meaning may be lost. Bandits prefer curves in the road and curves in a man's attention. Wolves prefer winter and indecision. Loneliness is cleverer than both. It arrives at dusk, sits beside the fire, and tells stories that begin with if only. The traveler answers with small rituals. A tighter knot, a whispered psalm, a pebble moved from one pocket to another each mile. These are not weapons. They are ways to remain himself. Companions, together for a while. Sometimes a peddler's bell rings from behind. Sometimes a cart overtakes and offers a ride until the next turning. A widow going to her sister's house. A mason bound for work, a boy with a dog and a secret all fall into step for a mile or 3. They part with nods that mean more than words, having traded nothing and something all at once. A small story for the night road. On a moonless stretch, a pilgrim once doubted his reasons and his feet. He stopped where a thorn bush held the wind like a badly tuned harp. In that stillness he felt for the tiny badge at his throat, a thin lead saint bent from use, and it felt warm. Perhaps from his skin, perhaps from a mercy that travels by quieter roads. He walked on, and the dark walked with him, but a little farther away. Arrivals and returns. A shrine is sometimes grand, sometimes hardly more than a stone polished by hands. Either way, the body bows, the throat learns a new dryness, and the eyes find water. A candle is lit for someone who could not walk this far. A name is left in a book or in a pocket of air where no ink is needed. Then comes a turning home. He is the same and not. He carries a tune that the road taught him, and it fits every step. What travel teaches. To go is to be measured by patience more than by miles. To arrive is to find that blessings are often ordinary. A dry place, a door that opens, a voice that does not hurry you. And to return is to become a vessel of elsewhere. A small shell, a new word, a way of tying rope, riches that cannot be taxed. When the sandals are finally set by the hearth, the road is not gone. It sleeps like a long sentence paused between clauses, waiting for the next breath. On market day, the road itself seems to lean toward the square. Carts arrive early, their wheels writing slow circles in the damp, and stalls unfold like careful origami. Canvas, rope, a plank set level with a folded wedge. The air wakes before people do. Onions declaring themselves from a distance, warm bread remembering the oven, wool carrying a faint wether of sheep. A bell rings. It does not command, it invites. The village answers by drifting toward its own center like embers toward a shared heat. The square is a conversation of small, tidy promises. Here a cooper taps the rim of a cask until the note is true. There a potter's thumb presses a last soft crescent into clay. A peddler hangs tinkling goods like a thin rain. Needles, pins, a mirror no larger than a palm that returns your face with a kindly blur. Fish lie on rush mats in ordered silver. Apples sit like red punctuation. Prices are written in more than coin. They are written in glances, in the tilt of a head, in the patience of a hand that does not yet reach for the purse. Barter is the old grammar. Eggs learn to equal salt. A length of leather finds the value of a clay jug. A promise due after harvest weighs the same for now as copper. Some debts travel on string, knots tied for days owed, then loosened with ale and thanks. Beside a post, a money changer turns foreign into familiar. Short cross, long cross, clipped edge weighed back into honesty. He speaks measures as if they were birds, yard, stone, peck, and keeps weights that sleep in a nested box, each waking with a small, satisfying kiss of iron. Market charters are the quiet law that makes the morning safe. Parchment, seals, and the Lord's right to protect traders within a fixed sunrise and sunset. Under that shelter, strangers become customers instead of questions. A reeve walks with a tally stick not to bite but to remember. The guild warden checks a seam, a loaf, a hinge. Quality like mercy is best when expected. The watch keeps an eye for sparks and quarrels. One candle upset could turn a fair into a red sermon. One word sharpened to a blade could empty a street. Today neither happens. Children learn the market by touching it. They roll a hoop between booths, lift a corner of cloth when they think no one sees, taste a sugared almond offered as a truce for good behavior. They stand very still to watch a juggler throw 5 afternoons into the air and catch them again, each one a bright, brief answer to gravity. A fiddler saws a patient tune from a single string. An old woman sells ribbons that remember other hair. Small coins go out in a brown river and return in smiles. Fairs bend time. Once or twice a year, the square grows a second story. Tents rising in calm colors, bolts of cloth spilling like riverbanks, spices sending out invisible flags. A man from the coast sells salt with the authority of a tide. A woman from a far city spreads silk that keeps a secret. Prices swell like summer clouds. A girl tests a length of linen against her wrist as if it might tell her whether next year will be kinder. A boy holds a knife he is too young to own and learns, in silence, to wait for himself. Behind the show, trade keeps its older face. Ledgers in tidy ink, marks that stand in for names. A thumbprint where a signature should be. Credit is the bridge between hope and inventory. A baker takes flour on trust and returns loaves that taste like agreement. A smith accepts iron that will be paid for in hinges and horseshoes. News hurries on those same lines. Ships delayed, a levy rumored, a saint's shrine working cures beyond expectation. By noon, the village knows more of itself than it knew at dawn. Fraud exists, but so does the art of noticing. A false weight feels tired in the hand. Waterdale smells of a half-made decision. The guild calls things by their right names, and the calling sets them straight. A trader who strays too far from honesty finds his stall oddly lonely. Reputation is a tent that travels. Once slit, it lets in weather. At the edge of the square, a quieter commerce. A mother swaps a recipe for a blessing. A widow sells skeins spun fine enough to hold a morning. A healer trades a sprig of something bitter for a story about why sleep has gone. These purchases do not enter ledgers, but they settle in the body. The market feeds more than mouths. By late day, the square exhales. Scales are nested, knives are sheathed, cloth is rolled back into patient bolts. A last loaf, a last onion, a last decision not to spend, each goes home with someone. The road straightens again, but the village is a little larger than it was. It has learned a new joke, a new price, a new word for rain. Tomorrow returns to its usual work. Today will carry it more gently, a small story to fold into a pocket. On a thin autumn, a weaver came with cloth no one could afford. He set it out anyway, blue as evening, smooth as a swallow. People touched and walked on. Near sunset, an old farmer counted coins that did not reach the price. The weaver looked at the man's hands and at the blue and said, "Bring me wool in spring." The farmer nodded. He left with the cloth. In spring he returned with wool the color of weather. The weaver smiled, and the debt was a door that had opened both ways. What markets teach. Not wealth but measure. Not noise but rhythm. That value, when tended together, becomes trust. And trust, when repeated, becomes a town that sleeps with its doors on their latches. Obligation arrives like weather. It is not sudden. It gathers on the horizon, becomes a color of sky, and then lives in the day. In the medieval village, dues do not knock. They already have the key. They sit at the edge of every loaf. They share a place beside the hearth. They count with the family when seed is poured from the sack. Rent, tithe, tallage, toll. Words that sleep in parchment and wake in the body. The map of owing. To live on a lord's land is to live within arithmetic. A cottage keeps two measures, one for hunger and one for duty. The first is grain, milk, eggs, the soft mathematics of survival. The second is tally marks cut into a stick, knots tied in cord, the clerk's narrow script. Each mark is a day promised, a cart owed, a hen due at Michaelmas, a piglet if fortune smiled too widely. The household learns to reckon by seasons and saints, rents in kind, harvest speaking in portions. Before coin there is grain. Every autumn sheaves leave the field by two roads, one toward the cottage loft, one toward the manor barn. The share is ancient and particular, so many bushels of rye, so many of barley, a last measure of oats that tastes faintly of chaff and patience. Cheese stacked and counted, eggs handed over one at a time, a smile worn carefully to keep them from cracking, honey in a clay jar, bees murmuring a bill no ledger can understand. Payment here is weight and cent and the creak of a door that opens for inspection. Cash rents, silver that remembers hands. Where markets breathe, coin enters the conversation. A fixed sum per vergate, a smaller one for a croft and garden. The reeve does not argue with numbers. He records them. The problem is not math but weather. Silver thins when rain forgets its job or remembers it too fiercely. Then a neighbor's loan moves like a shadow from one wall to another. Promises are made low at dusk with faces turned slightly away, as if privacy could be borrowed along with coin. Labor dues, the coin paid in bones. The oldest rent is the body. 3 days a week in the Lord's field when the year is kind. More when harvest insists. Plow with the oxen that do not belong to you. Reap with the sickle that does. The handle polished by your own sweat. Mow meadows, mend hedges, haul timber like a patient river. These are not requests. They are the grammar of tenure. In return, protection such as it is. A wall when war comes. A gate closed against wandering teeth. A place in the Lord's counting when danger adds. Boon works. When urgency raises its voice. At haymaking and harvest, the manor calls for extras. More hands than Monday and Wednesday know what to do with. Then the village answers as one body. Women glean and tie. Boys carry the water can. Elders sit near the stooks and judge the weather with proverbs. Payment is ale, a generous loaf, a joint of meat that tastes of festival. Fatigue goes home with everyone and mostly forgives. Church dues, the tithe that keeps the bell in voice. A tenth is the word, round and simple. A tenth of grain, of lambs, of honey if the bees have been busy, of flax if the summer remembered rain. The tithe barn is a quiet hunger turned outward. Doors wide, floor sweet with straw, corners where mice learn theology the hard way. No one imagines the priest eats all this. He eats, yes, but he also keeps candles burning. The roof mended. The poor in bread when a house goes to ashes. Heaven takes its share by way of earth. Small, stubborn fees, the pebbles in the shoe. There are dues that arrive not yearly but at life's sharp corners. Harriet, the best beast owed at a death as if grief must travel with a halter. Merchet, a payment at a daughter's marriage, the manor's way of nodding to the new household. Chavage, a fee for freedom to work elsewhere and still call this place home. Mill toll, a measure scooped by the miller's practiced hand for the right to turn water into flour. None are ruin. Together they are a careful drag on the day. Markets, bridges, and gates, tolls that turn wheels. To sell beyond the village, you pay for the road you use without owning. A toll at the bridge, a fee at the gate, a coin to set a stall where strangers become customers. These small payments are the oil in commerce. Too much and the cart refuses the hill. Too little and the wheels complain louder than thieves. A good reeve knows the balance by listening to the square, not the parchment. Records, the memory that does not forget. Obligation prefers ink. The manor roll is read aloud, names braided with numbers, dues noted with a finger's tap. Here a rent pardoned for service, there a fine for offense let go ragged. Tallies are bound in pairs, notches married to notches, so that fraud must cut wood as well as conscience. When disputes rise, the steward's voice is even. He speaks of years, as your father did, and years tend to win arguments against minutes. Exemptions and bargains, the air within the net. Freedom is not the absence of owing, but the art of renegotiation. A widow keeps her cottage for a year without rent while grief does its clumsy work. A good plowman bargains a lighter cash charge in return for extra days with the manor oxen. A craftsman pays tallage in coin and keeps his own time when the weather calls him not to furrows but to bench and awl. The Lord is not cruel. He is practical. Fields without tenants grow weeds faster than wheat. When the year fails, how dews learn to bend or break. Bad harvest test math. The tithe shrinks to a thinner tenth. Labor dues bite deeper because men are hungry, or else they slacken because men are sick. Rent in kind becomes rent in promise. At Candlemas if the mill runs, or after Easter if the lambs live. Some stewards forgive carefully, making mercy a loan that may one day collect itself. Others do not, and famine learns the names of households. A winter collection, seen in soft gray. Snow leans on the thatch. The reeve walks with his list while breath draws little ghosts from every mouth that speaks. At one door, a jug of ale and a stool near the fire before the counting. At another, a thin apology and a hope. He does not raise his voice. He does not have to. The ink is already dry on what will be owed when the world softens. He leaves behind fewer coins than he planned and more stories than he admits. What owing teaches. Dues do not exist to make people small. They exist to keep the scaffolding from falling. Too heavy and it crushes. Too light and the roof sags. Between those failures lies the ordinary miracle. A village that pays and eats and sings and sleeps. The bell rings because grain moved. The gate shuts because men labored. The poor are not forgotten because obligation finally remembered its first purpose. To bind without choking. A small story to keep with the tally stick. A cotter once came short at Martinmas, 2 measures of barley and a coin. He stood at the steward's table with his hat in his hands and the weather in his eyes. "I can give you a day a week till Candlemas," he said, "and the lambs if they come." The steward looked not at the man but at the village through him. How many walls needed mending? How many hedges would catch the New Year's wind? "Bring your spade," he said, "and keep your hat. It will snow." The coin was forgiven. The barley was turned into labor. The winter was bridged by a piece of ground made whole again. The gentle arithmetic. In the end, the sums that matter are not only lines on parchment. They are the measurable kindnesses that pass from house to house. A loaf slipped onto a sill. A day's work given without the tally's notch. A priest's purse emptied for a widow. A lord who looks the other way once and exactly once. This is the economy that lets sleep come. Doors on latches, animals quiet. Embers waiting under ash for morning to remember them. The table changes with the sky, spring green, summer bright, autumn stored, winter learned. Pottage is the metronome, bread a map of fortune. In a medieval year, appetite is a calendar you can taste. Measured not by clocks but by hedgerows, orchards, and the patient arithmetic of jars. Spring, lean and living. When frost loosens, hunger loosens only a little. The body tired of salted things reaches toward green. Nettles, sorrel, goosefoot, young leeks with the bite still in them, a handful of parsley too bold for winter. Milk returns to the pail with a sweetness that makes the morning gentler. Butter is pale now, shy with color. Cheese is fresh, softly uncertain, a promise more than a plan. Eggs arrive like punctuation, sudden, satisfying, reliable for a while. Lent keeps its hand on the shoulder. Meat stands aside and the pot learns quiet flavors. Onion, oats, a wink of mustard seed, a ladle of ale to make the thin feel kindly. Spring is not abundance. It is forgiveness, the hunger gap between hope and habit. Grain from last year thins before new grain is brave enough to ripen. Loaves grow smaller, crusts wider. The mill's wheel turns on patience as much as water. In this hallway of weeks, cooks practice a domestic mercy, stretching without embarrassing the plate. Pottage, barley, pea, a green handful from a ditch, turn steady again, the spoon moving like a metronome inside the day. Children chew slowly. Elders pretend not to notice and eat more slowly still. Summer, bright, brief, and busy. The garden forgets caution. Peas pop and tumble. Cabbages swell with good intentions. Beans climb twine like pilgrims climbing a hill. Herbs earn their names. Sage speaks, thyme remembers, mint forgives, dill smiles at fish. The table learns color. Marigold petals in broth, a slice of beet like a sunset in a bowl. Milk fattens and butter finally takes on the gold of afternoons. Cheese grows firmer, a small architecture. Curds drain in linen like shy moons. Fruit is rumor, then fact. Strawberries low to the ground, cherries in trees that demand trade, a scratch for each sweet. Bread returns to confidence. Wheat if fortune has manners, maslin if it doesn't. Ale is younger now, playful, a clean drink where water doubts itself. Preserving summer, teaching sunlight to last. Baskets do not keep, jars do. Women scald and salt and sweeten. Men smoke and hang and check the rafters. Greens are blanched, then kissed with vinegar. Cucumbers sink into brine like tired swimmers and wake as pickles. Apples are sliced into coins and threaded on strings to pay future hunger. Fish meets smoke. Pork meets salt. Beef learns the language of patience. Dill heads, mustard seed, pepper if anyone's purse is adventurous. Each is a small treaty between today and the cold months to come. A shelf becomes a landscape of promises. Clear glass, clouded vinegar, waxed linen tucked like a prayer over jam. Bread, the quiet class system on a board. Wheat is pride, white and festive. Maslin is compromise, wheat and rye sharing a crust. Rye is the realist, dense and kind to the long winter. Barley and oat play humbler roles, honest and filling, less boastful than necessary. A table says more with crumbs than with speeches. On feast days, a trencher of the good stuff. On weekdays, slices that behave themselves. Sometimes a loaf goes stale on purpose to become pottage's thickener, to keep broth loyal to the spoon. Autumn, stored and counted. Harvest teaches numbers to the hands. Onions are braided into ropes of days. Garlic becomes a rosary you can eat. Cabbage finds barrels, learns salt, and becomes winter's friend in a new tongue. Apples land with modest thuds. Pears bruise if you look at them unkindly. Plums ask for heat and reward it with jam that keeps the sun honest. Mushrooms appear where the woods whisper. The careful pickers bring only the ones that tell the right story. Nuts arrive like advice, crack slowly, share often. Grain settles in lofts, and the air smells politely of promise. The oven remembers its big voice. Flatbreads for haste, long loaves for patience, pies to hide odds and ends under a pastry ceiling that turns frugal into celebration. Meat, more calendar than habit. A pig is not eaten. It is visited. First the fresh cuts, belly for laughter, liver for the serious, small bits for the pan. Then brine, smoke, lard, and crocks. Sausages looped like well-behaved snakes from beam to beam. Beef waits for cold weather. Mutton agrees with pepper when pepper agrees with purse. Birds are feast or happenstance. Goose for saints, pigeon for a good day with a latter hen when patience is more valuable than pride. Fish is its own liturgy. Herring salted in far harbors, eels from nearby muddy miracles, trout remembered in butter and parsley. Fast days. The church's hand on the menu. Wednesdays, Fridays, Lent, vigils. Meat listens from the doorway while fish takes the table's head. Almond milk pretends earnestly to be many things and is forgiven for trying. Peas pottage, unashamed, steps into the gap and holds. A pot with onions, leeks, and oil speaks a soft language the stomach understands without argument. Fasting is not empty. It is tidy winter, learned and deliberate. Cold is a teacher of recipes, patience, and proportion. Pottage deepens. Barley grows thoughtful. Peas lend gravity. A bone gives counsel long after meat has left. Cabbage wakes from its salt dreams, bright and contrary. Onions sweat their sweetness into stews that last more than one evening. Bread dries at the hearth, then returns, toasted or sopped, as if it remembered something useful. Butter is a careful luxury. Lard is democratic. Cheese is older now, respectable. A small knife learns to cut thin enough to make enough. Spices appear like constellations, pepper, ginger, saffron when fortune blushes, each a star in a dark bowl. Honey is medicine and memory both. Winter meals do not astonish. They endure, feasts light gathered and shared. Saints' days open the cupboard wider. A goose that knew the fields, a pie that hides secrets respectfully, a pudding that ties raisins to sweet and asks everyone to be patient while it steams. The table remembers laughter without apology. Alley grows braver. Wine appears from somewhere farther than the next parish. Musicians tune with their eyebrows. For one long evening, scarcity sits as a guest and is treated kindly. Cures and comforts, kitchen as chapel. A pot of chicken with leeks for a tired chest. A tisane of mint for an upset temper. Sage for too much worrying. Thyme for weather and the bones, chamomile for a night that refuses to soften. Bread and milk for the very old and the very young. A spoon of honey for a throat that has carried too many songs. These do not refuse the physician. They simply arrive sooner. A small story, preserved like fruit. One October, after a summer generous with berries, a mother and daughter stood at the table while jars ticked as they cooled. The girl asked if winter would be long. The mother touched the row of ruby circles and said, "Long or short, we have a way to remember July." On the grayest day of February, they opened one, and the room smelled of hedgerows brave with birds. What the seasons teach. To chew with the month. To accept a smaller slice when the fields are busy paying debts. To store sunlight where glass can guard it. To let pottage keep time and bread keep counsel. Above all, to understand that a table is not only what stands upon it. It is the hands that learned it, the weather that wrote it, and the quiet gratitude that lets the last heel of crust become enough. Where bells keep time, pages keep it too. Knowledge travels slowly but stays. On a cold hillside, far from courts and quarrels, a monastery folds itself against the wind like a careful animal. Within its walls, hours are stitched by bell and breath. Matins before the village dreams end. Lauds with the first pale seam of light. Prime when the crows take attendance. Then the measured river of the day, terse. Sext none until vespers gathers the sun, and Compline lays the lamp down. Between those names there is work that looks like prayer and prayer that looks like work. The rule, the soft law that hardens into habit. He rises when the bell says rise, not when the heart does. He eats what is set before him and thanks it. He speaks seldom, not from shyness, but from stewardship. Words are tools, and dull tools wound wood. The rule asks for moderation, neither fasting into pride nor feasting into fog. It insists on hospitality with both hands. Bread for the stranger, bedding for the road dusted, a basin for travel's ache. In this grammar, obedience is not humiliation. It is agreement about what matters. Cloister, weather made walkable. Stone galleries ring a square of grass. In winter, the cloister keeps the wind in the corners. In summer, it braids shadow into mercy. Here a monk paces with a book held like a bird. There an elder counts beads with thumb that knows its way without seeing. The cloister is not a corridor but a compass. One walk around it and the mind faces true again. The scriptorium, where daylight becomes sentence. It is not a large room. Windows are narrow, to bring in light without bringing in weather. Tables tilt toward the day. Knives, pumice, and rulers wait like small, exact promises. Parchment arrives smelling faintly of pasture. The first task is to persuade it to lie flat, to accept lines to become a field where ink can be planted. Quills are cut with patient knives, then cut again when letters remind them to be sharper. Ink is a midnight brewed from oak's forgotten summers. Red is ground from patience and iron. Blue, when fortune smiles, is rare enough to make the air behave. He copies what is before him, letter by measured letter. This is not imitation. It is the humility of bridge building. Across centuries, a hand he will never see leaned over a page, and now his hand leans too. He spells not for speed, but for survival. Between the margins live small creatures. The habit of a capital growing leaves, a dragon chasing its tail around an initial, a saint stepping down from gold into the plane of the page. Illumination is not decorative. It is a second voice that sings where words must walk. Errors, prayers, and the mercy of the margin. No hand is flawless. A wandering eye drops a line. A drowsy wrist repeats one. Then the rubricator returns with a red thread and mends the broken sentence. Or the scribe himself leaves a note no one was meant to see. The day is long. Or, my hand is cold. Or, once, without apology, the wine was good. In the quiet stack of gatherings, a colophon sometimes breathes. Pray for the sinner who wrote this. The page forgives. Libraries, rooms that hold weathered summers. Shelves smell of leather and beeswax, of glue that remembers hooves, of dust that once was pollen. Some books wear chains not as prisoners, but as citizens of a public that must not lose them. Catalogs are modest. A monk's careful hand listing titles like family. The librarian knows where every silence is kept. He can find Augustine not only by a shelf, but by the sigh of the man who last read him. Schools, where boys learn to tie thought into knots and then untie them. At a long bench under a lectern, the trivium sets the first table. Grammar, how to say. Logic, how to mean. Rhetoric, how to persuade without lying. The quadrivium comes after, like four windows. Arithmetic's countable mercy. Geometry's theorems that behave even when men don't. Music's ratio that quiets and quickens in the same breath. Astronomy's patient map of the obedient stars. In cathedral schools, the bishop's shadow falls across slates. In monastic schools, the abbot's patience falls across yawns. Masters speak from a book aloud. Students catch the words on wax tablets, then on scrap parchment, then, when they are trusted, on memory. Disputation, the gentle forge for minds. A question stands in the center like a brazier. Objections circle it, warming their hands. Replies lay down one by one like tidy firewood. The master says, on the contrary, and the room learns the weight of other people's thinking. Then comes the sed contra, then the respondeo, his own careful bridge across the river of disagreement. No one leaves with a sword. They leave with a rope. Women's houses, where silence has a different color. In a convent, the bell's voice is the same and different. Nuns keep gardens of physic and prayer. Brew simples that taste of meadow and patience, teach girls their letters and their psalms. Some stitch altar cloths with borders of vines that never existed but should have. Some write visions like weather reports from an interior sky, music that climbs where voices dare. They are not spared the world. They answer it with a steadier breath. Translators and travelers of text. In scriptoria near ports and borders, words arrive with salt in their hair. A monk with Greek in his pocket sits beside one with Latin. Between them, Aristotle becomes a neighbor. Elsewhere, a scholar hears Arabic shine with numbers that behave better than old counts, and he snips the fence between languages with a cautious knife. Algebra crossing into evening prayers. Medicine learning new herbs by new names. A book is not a wall. It is a fairy binding, how paper learns to be a body. Sheets are folded, sewn into gatherings, pressed until even the pages that argued now lie down together. Boards are laced on with thongs. Leather draws its breath across wood and accepts its duty. Clasps keep the winter from prying. A book is finished when it makes a small sound like a kettle cooling. A satisfied hush. Hospitality. Ink and bread from the same pantry. Travelers come. Pilgrims with boots that look like maps. Widowers with questions. Boys sent by mothers who want them to be less hungry in the head. The porter receives them with a smile that belongs to no one and therefore to everyone. In the guest hall, they eat at a table that doesn't ask their names. Later in the library, A lay brother holds a book open for hands too tired to hold it, and the visitor reads a page he will remember longer than the meal. Gardens, kitchens, infirmary, knowledge under a hat of straw. Herb beds are laid out like paragraphs, sage beside rue, fennel answering dill across the path. In the still room, glass pays attention to steam. Oils capture afternoons. Syrups hold the shape of summer. In the infirmary, a sleepy monk lifts a spoon to a mouth that is thinking of other things. A bandage is changed with a calm so steady it feels like weather. Knowing how to heal begins with knowing how to listen. Night office. Letters in the dark. At matins, when most of the world is turned away from itself, the choir stalls fill with shadows that sing. A psalm wears the room like a cloak. The scribe rubs his fingers for warmth, then traces a small line under a word that asked for a second chance. He closes the book with both hands as if setting down a small sleeping animal. Outside, frost writes its brief commentary on the cloister roof. A small story, the page that forgot despair. Once a novice struggled with a line that would not lie still. He scraped and rewrote until the parchment tired of forgiving. The master came, said nothing, and set beside him a scrap of vellum with a single letter, perfect and patient. "Trace this," he said, "and feed your hand." The novice did, night after night. Years later, in a book whose gold had grown calm, a reader found a tiny initial that seemed to breathe. He smiled without knowing why. Somewhere in the binding, the novice's first traced letter was still at work. What monasteries and schools keep. Not only pages, but proportions. Not only arguments, but manners for arguing. They keep the harvest of thought. Some green, some ripe, some stored for years against leaner winters of the mind. The world outside roars and rests. Inside, a bell rings. A quill leans into its ordinary miracle. A boy recites. A woman hums over a mortar. The librarian turns a key. Where bells keep time, pages keep it too. And when the bell is silent, the page remembers. War seldom knocks politely. It arrives with smoke on its sleeve and a timetable written by someone far away. Walls buy time, not peace. Fields, being plants and patient, heal faster than men. Alarms when the quiet tilts. It begins as a rumor that learns to ring. A rider seen on the ridge. Geese lifting too suddenly from the river. Then the bell. Not the tidy peal of saints' days, but the wide-armed cry that asks the whole town to have one heartbeat. Doors slam, then open again to let neighbors in. The reeve lifts a horn. The watch points. Someone who never runs. The levy. How a village puts on armor made of names. Every holding owes bodies as well as barley. The list is older than the boys on it. Men sort themselves by habit. Those who have bows, those with bills and glaives, those with nothing but a stout stick and the willingness to be pointed. A Lord's messenger reads the writ. A priest stands near and says little. Mothers pack bread as if it were benediction. Wives tie knots in ribbon that the men will not untie until they come home. If they come home. Training that is really remembering. No one becomes an archer in an afternoon. The bow asks years of shoulders and a childhood of Sundays spent at butts by the hedge. Fletchers know the talk of feathers. Bowyers listen to you the way millers listen to water. The billman's strength is not speed, but the patience of a fence that decides to move. A shield does not stop fear. It teaches fear to arrive later. Heraldry and order. The grammar of movement. On the green, banners unroll like definitions. Colors mean doors. Go here, stand there, wait until that gold animal coughs into the wind. The constable walks the line and corrects quietly. Feet a little closer, bowstrings kept dry, pikes nested like reeds. War is loud when it starts. It is meticulous before that. Provisioning, the arithmetic of mouths. Bread is cut into distances. Oil is counted in afternoons. Salt becomes a currency. Ox carts creak with sacks that look like choices. In the quartermaster's book, a man is a number with edges. He will need so much today. More if it rains. Less if the march is long and hope is short. Fires are forbidden until they aren't. Water is a voice that says, "Not here, farther." March. How a road learns the weight of worry. Boots study ruts. Ruts reply. The column is a sentence with clauses that drag. Vanguard that pretends to be brave. Midguard where most of the talking happens. Rearguard that hears every snapped twig twice. Children wave from hedges. Dogs understand none of it and all of it. The day stretches like wool. The pack straps answer with red arguments on shoulders. Night arrives with a taste of iron, and the camp grows like a careful fungus around its fires. Camp. Order taught to darkness. Ditches first, then tents. Latrines with their backs to the wind. Kitchen fires with their faces to it. A watch is posted where the ground thinks like a thief. Sentries measure the night in paces and prayers. Dice appear and vanish. A song starts badly and improves. In the surgeon's corner, a knife sleeps clean for now. Contact when distance gives up. War's first sound is often not steel, but a horn that sounds disappointed. Arrows arrive as weather. A hiss like angry grass, a thud like rain that means it. Men learn new verbs quickly. Advance, dress, brace, and one very old one, breathe. The ground, newly important, is suddenly everyone's friend. A man thinks he will run toward glory. He runs instead toward where his captain's voice is, because voices are maps, archers and quarrels. Longbows speak in parabolas. They write their arguments above the heads of the living. Crossbows speak in shorter, angrier sentences. Shields, once polite, become necessary. A good captain reads the wind and the men and finds a hill that likes him. Feathers and cords and crank handles. These are the small mechanics by which a morning chooses who continues into afternoon. Steel and wood. Close work. Pikes lean together into a hedge that ambulates. Bills hook, then pull the world nearer. A mace explains that armor is only a suggestion. Swords, when they appear, are more hammer than needle. The best advice remains unfancy. Stay with your pair. Look down before you step. Remember that backs are doors. The second best advice is older. Do not insult the horse. Siege. Patience with sharp teeth. A town rings itself inside its walls. The moat forgets to be picturesque and becomes a throat. Within, the market square learns to be a mustering ground. The church vault learns to be a granary. Attics become catalogs of everything that can burn later if it must. Rationing puts a ruler to appetite. The words after and when this ends leave the conversation and wait in the rafters. Outside, the besiegers draw circles, each one closer than the last. Engines come forward with the slow confidence of furniture. Mangonels that throw the memory of trees. Trebuchets that count to 3 and deliver a sermon of stone. Rams that knock and do not stop knocking. Miners listen for answers in the ground. Sappers, patient, introduce a city to the idea of falling inward. Walls. What stone can and cannot do. Battlements buy time. They do not buy sense for those who stand upon them. Arrow slits teach carefulness to eyes. Hoardings go up like wooden eyebrows. The gatehouse becomes a throat that can close. The postern a whisper that can open. Wells are counted and courtyards measured for where shadows will be at the hour when thirst speaks rudely. A wall's first duty is not defiance. It is calendar, fire, and water, their old negotiations. Pitch learns to fly. Water learns to climb in leather buckets. Ladders scratch at parapets like impolite trees. A pot of sand waits for a spark that plans too much. When a catapult stone drops into a roof, men become carpenters while being soldiers. The town is taught that a house is not a person. The town argues that it is terms and trumpets, the grammar of surrender. Under a flag that has learned temporary honesty, people say numbers at one another. Days, hostages, ransoms, the poundage of wheat, the fate of the garrison. An honorable surrender is a story everyone agrees to tell later in kinder words. A bad one is a noise that never quite stops ringing. Mercy, when it appears, is cheaper than rebuilding and more memorable than cruelty. Someone writes it down. Plunder, ransom, parole, the commerce of aftermath. Victory breeds accountants. Goods are counted twice. Once by those who carry them, once by those who will remember. Ransom is a ladder back into life for the captured. Parole is a promise thrown ahead of a man so he can walk behind it home. Priests and notaries become very busy. Gold learns how to be heavy. Wounds. What steel begins and hands continue. A blade's work is brief. Healing is the long profession. In the tent that smells of wine and old linen, a surgeon's hands walk careful paths. Bandage, stitch, poultice, prayer. Leeches are more punctuation than cure. Honey argues gently with rot. Men learn that pain has chapters. Some can be turned, some reread, some refused. Scars become maps others study when they think no one sees. Widows, orphans, and missing names. War writes letters in other people's hands. A woman learns to be her own steward. A child becomes an apprentice a year too soon. An empty chair becomes a relic. The parish takes in, the guild extends a quiet list, the manor forgives a rent and does not announce it. Grief is not a single guest. It is a family that moves in. It eats at different times than the rest of the house, rebuilding how stone remembers fingers. When the smoke tires, brooms begin. Rubble becomes sorted into futures. This for a new wall, that for a road, that for a garden to mean something again. Carpenters speak soft to beams that have known heat. Masons persuade corners to return to right angles. Children learn that planting after fire tastes different but is still planting. A town's first laugh after a siege happens at a badly told joke and is perfect anyway. Militia. Soldiering that has a bedtime. In peace, the watch drills as if the next wind could bring a banner. Twice a month, pikes come out to remember what upright means. Archers count their arrows aloud as a kind of hymn. The captain walks with a dog that dislikes drums. Curfews protect the careless from their own evenings. The armory is a closet that keeps promises for later. Frontier, chevauché, raid, the fast grammar of fear. Not all war is sieges and squares. Some is a horse's short shadow at noon. A field set alight because grain is courage. A bridge unmade to turn a road into a question. Villages learn to bury what matters where only they can find it. Bells are rehearsed. The first thing moved is the old. The second is the young. Then come the jars of a season's sunlight. Weather, the Third Army. Mud defeats formations. Frost mocks gloveless fingers. Fog hides mercy and ambush in equal measure. Summer is a soldier that changes sides at noon. A captain who reads clouds wins more than a scholar who refuses to. Men who share cloaks survive long enough to argue about it. Priests, oaths, and the strange decency of rules. War wears a set of manners that are honored enough to matter, and broken often enough to be famous. Priests bless both sides because bread must be broken whichever way the blade points. Oaths are said with faces that will remember them differently later. Heralds carry words through danger as if words were children. Sometimes men let them. It is not goodness exactly. It is stubbornness in favor of a world that continues. A small story, kept like a medal in a drawer. In a town with a wall that had learned many winters, a boy too young for the levee stood beside the gate during a fearful noon. He held a pitcher for men who did not know yet whether they were thirsty. An archer, older than his bow, drank and set the pitcher back with care. Walls buy time, he told the boy, so that hands can buy peace. Years later, the boy, now a mason, said a final Saint-O, siegecraft and practice, how patience grows teeth. A siege begins not with shouting, but with measuring. Engineers pace the field as if reading a stubborn book. They mark where the ground cups a wheel, where a ditch remembers a winter, where the wall forgets to be tall. Then the slow grammar unfolds, approaches and saps. Men with spades write zigzags into the earth, first parallel to the wall, then forward in short angled sentences. Gabions, baskets stuffed with earth, stand like polite temporary giants. Fastens bundles of brush soften the lip of a ditch. Each night the trench creeps while the town sleeps with one eye open. By morning the besiegers are a little nearer, and the defenders a little thriftier with stones, mantlets, shields, and the creeping roof. Behind portable screens, the mantlets, bowmen and crossbowmen trade courtesies with the parapet. Finna and testudo, timber roofs on rough feet move forward like patient animals that hate fire. Wet hides hang from their flanks, sulking but useful. The lesson is dull and therefore merciful. A yard gained slowly is almost never given back. Batteries and throwing engines. Mangonels fling the memory of trees. Trebuchets sing in 3 parts, sling, arm, counterweight, and release like a prayer that expects an answer. Stones learn the town's surname and visit often. Later centuries teach iron to fly. Bombards squat like impatient kettles, lobbing arguments that end conversations and roofs alike. Between shots, gunners clean, tamp murmur to powder as one murmurs to a skittish horse. Rams and the theology of doors. A gate believes in itself until it doesn't. Under a penthouse of beams and rawhide, the ram practices a short liturgy. Lift, swing, deliver. Iron heads grow bearded with splinters. Carpenters, half priest and half doctor, bind the ram and bless it with tar. The portcullis learns to endure. The wicket learns to lie. Mining and countermine. Underground, men move by ear. A miner listens to the footstep of stone, props timbers, lights a small, obedient flame, and walks a tunnel toward a wall's secret ankle. A charge of brush and pitch, later powder, persuades the foundations to forget their vocation. Within, the defenders dig back, countermine against mine, a chess match played in darkness with shovels. When tunnels meet, men fight in a room the size of a pantry where victory smells of clay. Escalate and surprise. Not every wall is won by patience. Ladders rise at moonrise. Grapnels argue with crenels. On a rain-noisy night, a handful of men climb into a history book and hope to be a paragraph. Sometimes they are. More often the wall answers with boiling things, heavy things, and the simplest thing of all, many hands pushing together. Blockade. The quiet siege. When engines are few but hunger is faithful, the besiegers sit on roads like careful stones. They count wagons that do not arrive. Birds still allowed to come and go sing more than usual. Inside the walls, the market learns to whisper. Cats learn to become stern. Bread learns arithmetic. Capitulation. Terms drawn with ash. In the end, a wall is a calendar and a ledger. When both disagree with hope, the gate opens inward. Keys change pockets. The garrison walks out with their lives and sometimes their banners. The town exhales like a bellows closed at last. A clerk writes the day in a small, neat hand. Stones remember, and so do doors. The law of booty. How greed is taught to count war loves plunder. Towns love rules. Between them, custom bargains, first rights. The lord takes a stated share, an old fraction that remembers older fractions. The captain has pick over horses and harness. The banner party receives a token of rank. Churches, hospitals, and women under protection are named aloud as off-limits, because saying it aloud helps more than writing it quietly. Ransom before ruin. A living captive is a purse that walks. Gentle prisoners are valued not for their swords, but for their signatures. A man's armor may be taken, his word returned to him. He writes to kin. Gold learns a road. Gates of cities open to bags carried by cousins and clerks. The market of spoil. After a storming, the camp grows a market with a bad conscience. Tables appear. Waits wake. A saddle becomes coin. A ring becomes bread for a month. A bolt of cloth becomes quiet. The quartermaster notes shares with an accounting that tries to resemble justice. What cannot be divided is auctioned. What cannot be carried is burned. Fire is a strict appraiser. Discipline and restitution. A soldier who steals from a church loses more than coin. He loses the captain's sleep. Fines are paid in very public shame. Sometimes restitution moves like water downhill, from lord to captain to man. Because someone must be responsible, and the town must be able to rise tomorrow with less anger than tonight. Spoil versus supply. Booty is not logistics. The army that trusts victory to plunder eats once. The army that keeps ledgers eats again. Wise captains convert part of the spoil into barrels, carts, shoeing, and pay. Small investments that keep men obedient to a future. Fortification arts. How stone learns to be thoughtful. A wall is not a line. It is a set of manners taught to space. Earth first. Ditches are negative walls, harder to cross than to understand. A glacis, a gentled slope, tells arrows to fly longer and ladders to be shy. The counterscarp, kept trimmed like a stubborn beard, denies the besieger a clean foothold. Earth absorbs what stone amplifies, faces and corners. Round towers persuade stones to glance. Square towers dare them to bite. Machicolations blink wooden eyelids. Murder holes translate gravity into policy. Arrow slits widen inside like horns to let air and aim agree. A gatehouse is a throat with several decisions. Drawbridge, portcullis, doors that fold like prayers. Rooms above that pour corrections. Hoardings and temporary teeth. In danger, carpenters hang wooden galleries from the battlements. Through their floors, defenders address ladders and the men on them. Wet hides explain themselves to fire and are believed. When the siege passes, the hoardings come down, stacked like a memory that may be needed again. Water, the polite ally. Moats do not need depth as much as width. A narrow moat is a mistake written in mud. A broad moat is an argument that will be read slowly. Sluices give the castle a voice. Higher, lower, sometimes silent. Wells are counted as carefully as arrows. Springs are bribed with stone. Communication and sign. Beacons talk farther than men can walk. A code of 3 fires or 2 tells valleys and coasts what the mouth cannot carry in time. In daylight, pen and say here, da hold and help. At night, bells do the same so that a town may sleep and watch. Maintenance, the unfamous hero. Limewash is not glamour. It is weather management. Weeds are enemies with green faces. A root becomes a wedge, becomes a crack, becomes a story told at a ruin. Masons tap mortar with a listening thumb. A good wall is less built than kept, gunpowder's whisper. Late in the tale, guns ask walls to learn new lessons. Lower, thicker curtains. Angled banks that gulp balls into earth. Towers that are less proud and more round. The art does not die. It adapts. Stone partnering with soil. Parapets humpbacked like patient animals. Embrasures cut to suit iron's new temper. The little door. A postern is the castle's secret thought. Through it ride messages, forays, and hope at midnight. To bolt it is wisdom. To forget it is history. Privilege looks warm from a distance. Up close it has drafts. Stone promises safety and then remembers it is also a refrigerator. Titles carry doors that open and debts that do not close. In castles, hardship wears velvet shoes, cold stone's first language. A great hall is grand in daylight and honest at midnight. The fire works hard and loses. Heat climbs to the beams, the rushes underfoot keep their own weather. Tapestries hang to persuade walls to be kinder. The walls admire the effort and remain walls. In bed, a noble learns the arithmetic of blankets. Fur over linen, wool over fur, a wife's cold feet over everything. In the morning, the basin is iced into a small, stubborn mirror. Hot water travels up stairwells the way news does, slowly and already colder. Smoke, safety's price. Hearths burn in many rooms. Chimneys sulk if the wind is wrong. Soot draws a thin glove across tapestries and lungs alike. A child coughs through a lullaby. A steward notes which flue needs a mason. The kitchen exhales into the yard and hopes the wind has a better idea this afternoon. Stone keeps fire and weather at arm's length. The arm is not always the right length. Cleanliness negotiated. Baths are an event, not a habit. Water is brought, heated, carried, spilled, carried again. Screens are set. Perfumes argued over. Privacy borrowed from courtyards that pretend not to listen. Lice disregard heraldry. So do fevers. Physicians arrive with bottles that smell of gardens and books. Some advice works because the body wanted to heal anyway. Sometimes the best medicine is a room with an open shutter and a servant who learned to wash his hands before fashion did. Food. Abundance with asterisks. The castle kitchen is a universe with seasons of its own. Scullery like a rainy coast. Ovens like volcanoes with schedules. Spits that turn with the logic of planets. There is enough, more than enough, on feast days when peacocks return in their feathers and sauces speak 3 languages. Between feasts, the arithmetic shrinks. Salted meats remember last winter. Fish remembers a river that lives in rumor. Bread is proudly white and therefore less forgiving. A noble stomach lives with small treasons, not spoiled exactly, just disappointed. Disease. This rank ignores rank. Plague does not bow, coughs do not curtsy. A lady who owns 3 dozen keys owns the same air as her laundress. In childbed, privilege promises attendance, linen, prayers, and does not promise survival. In winter, joints narrate the weather. In summer, fevers compose their own psalms. The castle physician keeps both leeches and humility. The second is the better tool, politics, the weather inside. Walls keep out strangers. Power invites them. Courtiers arrive with stories that sound like favors and behave like hooks. A noble's table is a chessboard with bowls on it. A marriage proposal disguised as a pear. A treaty disguised as a joke. A reconciling glance that will be charged interest later. Loyalty is weighed like coin. Trust is weighed like glass. Everyone smiles with a few teeth off duty. Security the arithmetic of doors. Keys hang at a lady's belt and at a lady's worry. Who sleeps in the outer hall? Who inside? Who near the nursery? Who near the room where the family silver behaves at night? Each placement is a sentence with meanings that will be read for years. Guards are paid. Guards have cousins. Hospitality is holy and also risky. A castle is a sermon that begins, "Let me show you where the exits are." Marriage. Politics written on a body. A noblewoman does not marry so much as she is married. She brings land, alliance, dowry, and a face that will be painted kindly in another man's hall. She counts her safety in sons and in the patience of her husband's temper. She writes letters that are actually lifelines. She prays for daughters who will live and for sisters-in-law who will not resent that fact. When she travels between houses, she travels between climates of power. Different kitchens, different devotions, different ways for a word to become a weapon. Example, Lady Agnes behind the wall. In one winter remembered by the sea, a lady keeps a castle that does not intend to fall. She is not often at the battlements, wind is unkind to lungs, but she is everywhere else, counting barrels twice, speaking soft to the garrison about patience, softer to her steward about fairness, and softer still to the baker because bread is morale in a crust. When stones fall from engines outside, she sends boys with baskets to fetch them back. We shall need these for our own walls. When a messenger brings terms, she hears him in a room with a low ceiling and a high candle. She nods as if considering and then does not change anything at all. People will later call her Black Agnes and mean courage. She will remember only lists, a day in a noblewoman's life, the ordinary siege. Dawn. She wakes before bells because worry keeps earlier hours. She is measured into her day. Linen, wool, brooches like small shields, a ring that remembers her mother's hand. She eats something simple. She lets someone else eat something better. She visits the nursery and counts small breaths. She visits the pantry and counts larger ones. At Mass, she kneels and the floor answers her knees with a factual cold. When she rises, the petition rises with her. Keep walls, keep wheat, keep the peace long enough to deserve it. Midday, audiences. Tenants with disputes that were once about hedges and are now about hunger. A prioress who knows which women lost husbands and which lost tempers. A captain who says the word later too often. She mends what she can with coin and law. When neither fits, she mends with promises and a memory like a ledger. Outside, a hawk learns the sky again. Inside, a child knocks a trencher and laughs. The laugh is her favorite spy, evening letters. A cousin across the border who is suddenly poetic about trade. A bishop who remembers an unpaid gift. A brother who writes from court in sentences that sweat. She dictates replies with velvet edges and iron cores. Then she walks the wall. Slowly, wrapped well with 2 women who gossip just enough to keep the wind from winning. In her chamber, she removes a ring and finds a red circle that is not quite pain. She considers all the circles in her life and opens the window a little to let one of them go. Modern luxury versus historical privilege. The modern apartment, whether humble or not, can be warmed by a dial. A castle cannot. A hospital has soap bred for the purpose. A lord has rosemary and hope. Privacy is a door that closes. In a castle, it is a curtain that listens. Abundance today arrives by trucks that are not political. Abundance then arrived in wagons with opinions. Privilege then could summon music but not antibiotics. Cooks but not clean water when winter sulked. Soldiers but not predictable neighbors. Power is useful. Comfort is rarer, constraint. The fence around blessing. The noble woman eats before others, but after fear. She can save a tenant with a word or lose a son with a fever. She can sign a charter and cannot sign her own truce with childbirth. She lives surrounded by servants who know when she cried. She sleeps with tapestries that whisper of saints who suffered nobly. And she wonders whether nobility is just sometimes a more expensive kind of suffering. She keeps the keys and is kept by them. A small parable, a fur mantle turned blanket. On a wind-fat night, a messenger limps in, salt dried into his cloak. The lady's steward says there is no room. The lady says there is room. She sends the messenger to the bench near the kitchen fire, and when he sleeps, she sends her own mantle to cover him. Because old bones remember wind too well. In the morning he goes, and later in the season comes another letter with fewer teeth. Mercy is both policy and pillow. What noble hardship teaches. That rank is not roof. It is weather. That walls keep out enemies and keep in drafts. That luxury, if it cannot become comfort, becomes theater. That names open doors but do not warm hands. And that the easiest sleep in a castle belongs to the dog. In the soft hour when screens dim themselves and the day loosens its laces, a reader sits with the Middle Ages laid out like a map of old weather. He is not after nostalgia. He is after a kind of eyesight. The past cannot be repeated, but it can be read, and reading it well is a modern craft. What survives the centuries? Under armor and altars, beneath laws written on bark and bells, one thread crosses time. Human beings trying to make sense of cold, hunger, danger, and each other. Some built walls, some wrote prayers, some told jokes that were really instructions. They were not simpler than us. Their problems were not smaller. They were only differently arranged. If there is a lesson, it lives where arrangement becomes understanding. Gratitude, hygiene, medicine, and the quiet miracle of pipes. He turns on a tap and a river answers. This is not a small thing. It is the end of centuries that knew thirst even in the rain. He opens a bottle that smells of clean. He forgets how new that is. Soap took time. Drains took courage. The knowledge that invisible things can harm, and that other invisible things can keep us safe, was learned slowly, at cost. A vaccination is a bell rung inside a body. An antibiotic is a story that stops a villain in time. A hospital is a monastery that learned to count better and to wash more. He sets these facts down in his mind the way a careful cook sets knives. Not boastfully, but ready. Gratitude, rights that assume a person is not furniture. Trials decided by evidence instead of rumor. Consent that must be asked, not assumed. The right to speak without a noble standing behind the tongue. The suspicion that power should be answerable. None of these are perfect. All of them are astonishing. A worker today can hate Monday and still expect to survive it. A child can learn letters instead of learned silence. A widow can sign her name and expect it to mean the same on Tuesday as on Friday. He does not clap for these things. He keeps them the way one keeps a candle from a draft, against the soft lie of romance. To love the past is not to dress it in silk. The castles were cold. The bread was sometimes a disappointment. The air was a common bowl, and disease drank first. Chivalry was often a rumor told to cover someone's account. Many lives were short not because fate was cruel, but because infrastructure was absent. When modern people sigh that they were born in the wrong century, they often mean they are hungry for meaning, kinship, and quiet. Those things exist now. They simply do not come prearranged with gambesons and lutes. We must build them on purpose. What to borrow from them? Maintenance instead of miracle. The medieval day believed in the dignity of upkeep. Lime wash against weather, hedge laying against wandering sheep, mending as a first reflex rather than a last resort. He wonders what a maintenance-shaped life might feel like now. A phone updated before it aches. Friendships patched before they tear. A neighborhood fence repainted before it becomes a rumor about negligence. Glory is a headline. Maintenance is a habit. Habits win. What to borrow? Seasonal literacy. They chewed with the month. So might we. Not as a diet, but as a conversation with time. Work that gathers in summer and sorts in autumn. Rest that has a gentle insistence in winter. Plans that sprout in spring without shame. A spreadsheet can be a field if treated with seasons. Deadlines do not need to be weatherless. He writes in his calendar, instead of fighting February, design February. What to borrow? Commons and small covenants. A green was kept because everyone agreed to keep it. A mill worked because a town paid attention. Today's cousins are parks, libraries, servers, sidewalks. The commons always looks ordinary until it disappears. He considers the least glamorous thing he uses daily and writes a quiet promise to it. I will keep you clean. I will pay you honest. I will defend you at meetings where people would rather talk about shinier things. What to borrow? Rituals that hold attention without breaking it. Bells taught the day to breathe. Not alarms, just invitations. He cannot install church bells, but he can invite his hours to have edges. A stretch at noon. A lamp lit at dusk. A book that lives open on the table and is not judged by pages per hour. Prayer if it suits. Silence if it does not. A ritual is simply a corridor that keeps the wind from rushing through the entire house at once. What to borrow? Craft and the right speed. The scribe's lesson is not slowness for its own sake. It is fitness of pace to purpose. Some tasks need speed because they belong to the living. Some need deliberation because they belong to memory. He chooses where to be fast and where to be faithful. An email can be swift. A condolence cannot. A report can be crisp. A promise must be slow enough to be real. What to borrow? Story as a civic technology. Mystery plays, market tales, pilgrim badges that carried little narratives. These were not distractions. They were glue. Today, a town hall that begins with a story ends with fewer interruptions. A company that tells its purpose in human sentences hires better. A family that repeats its favorite anecdote is not boring. It is editing itself into something that can be carried forward. The limits that protect. Medieval life had limits that were not optional. Night, winter, famine, walls. Many killed, some kept. He looks at his own walls. Do not read the news before coffee. No devices in bed. Do not argue after 10. Keep a Sabbath, a day of not improving. These are not deprivations. They are sluice gates. They let feeling collect into lakes instead of floods. A litany of thank yous. Thank you, clean water, for arriving at the sink without a negotiation. Thank you, antibiotics, for finishing fights we cannot see. Thank you, vaccines, for teaching our cells to remember the right things. Thank you, soap and drains, for being unromantic. Thank you, labor laws, for making tiredness less lethal. Thank you, schools, for putting letters into many mouths. Thank you, rights, for insisting that a person is not inventory. Thank you, boring institutions, for being boring on purpose. How to stop romanticizing without becoming cynical. He permits himself affection for the past the way he permits himself affection for a difficult relative. Warmly, but with boundaries. He can admire a cloister and still love a clinic. He can enjoy the pageantry of banners and still vote for budgets. He can listen to a lute and still buy a smoke detector. The opposite of romance is not contempt. It is care. A small story, 2 kitchens. In a stone kitchen 500 years ago, a woman stirs a pot that contains the same 4 flavors for the 3rd day. She hums, not because the stew is good, but because her child will be tired enough to sleep after eating it. In a small apartment tonight, an office worker opens a fridge, sighs at too many choices, and orders something warm in a box. He eats, then carries a bowl of water to his window plant and hums for the same reason. Human noises repeat. So do mercy's resilience, what it is not and what it is. It is not suffering in silence. It is not heroics every Tuesday. It is the ordinary courage of continuing. refilling the woodpile of the future, telling the truth before it grows teeth, leaving a meeting when you cannot add kindness to it. The medievals survived because they did these things in various disguises, gleaning guilds, bright festivals in dark months. We survive by arranging our own equivalents. Mutual aid groups, potlucks, long walks, a book club that sometimes reads and sometimes just holds. Humility toward nature. Fields forgive faster than men and also faster than fantasies. Weather is not an opinion poll. He learns to read the forecast as a citizen, rather than a plaintiff. He plants trees he will not meet as adults. He does not treat snow as a personal insult. He thanks the river for remaining a river and promises not to ask it to be a road. A note on power. The Middle Ages built hierarchies. So did we. Ours are hidden by glass and apps. The lesson is not to pretend power is gone. It is to confess it early and design against its worst habits. Publish policies. Rotate who speaks first. Pay attention to who carries the key ring and who carries the mop. The mop tells truer stories, education, letters as a public right. Scriptoria guarded books like wells. Today, a library card is a small treaty between a town and its future. He resolves to defend someone else's. He remembers that literacy is not only decoding text, it is also the courage to ask, says who, and then wait for an answer without shouting. Pilgrimage without leaving. Not everyone can walk to Compostela. Most do not need to. A pilgrimage is any long attention offered to a good thing. 30 afternoons spent learning the names of neighborhood birds. 12 evenings repairing a chair until it no longer wobbles. 40 conversations with a friend whose laugh has become rare. The badge is not a shell. It is a calendar with gentle holes where days are remembered. Justice built from the small end. The Middle Ages were not fair. Neither are we. Justice is not a tide that arrives by itself. It is stacked like firewood, casework, listening, the boring miracle of forms, the necessary theater of protest, the quiet maintenance of alliances after headlines move on. He resolves to leave a room a little fairer than he found it. Failing that, a sentence. Hospitals and hospitality. The Latin cousins were once closer. To be hospitable now is a kind of health care. Invite the loud neighbor to a calm afternoon. Carry soup across a hall. Send a text that does not need to be answered. Some loneliness is a disease because it makes the body doubt its borders. Bread and small talk are not cures, but they are splendid medicines. What to teach children? Chores that are really citizenship. In that earlier world, little hands carried big meanings. A candle to the altar hum softly in the background, and let's drift together into tonight's journey. So what do we walk away with, after stepping into that harsh, ungenerous century for only a moment? He sits with the lamp turned low, the room arranged into islands of quiet, and lets the Middle Ages recede like a tide. The sand it leaves behind is not empty. It is full of tracks, animal, human, and the small winding signatures of persistence. Lesson 1. Comforts are recent, fragile, and specific. Sanitation is not just pipes. It is agreements, budgets, and workers who show up before dawn. Food security is not a full pantry. It is seasons, logistics, and the kind of peace that keeps roads honest. Medicine is not a single miracle. It is a library shelved inside many minds. A chain of careful hands and a culture that remembers to wash. These are not permanent. They are maintained. He understands that gratitude is not a posture. It is a practice. Paying taxes without sneer when they repair the invisible arteries of the city. Voting for the boring line items. Thanking the nurse who adjusts a blanket at 3 a.m. Because without such habits, history does not so much repeat as resume. Lesson 2. Nostalgia needs supervision. Simpler times is a phrase that forgets who did the labor of simplicity. When people sigh for clean narratives, they often mean clean kitchens they did not have to scrub. The past had warmth, yes, but much of it came from people burning themselves as fuel. A castle feast glitters. 100 kitchens ache behind it. A ballad charms. The hands that patched the singer's sleeves were tired. He does not ban affection. He builds guardrails for it. Admire the craft. Admit the costs. Tell both parts of the story or neither. Lesson 3. Understanding deepens gratitude and responsibility. History has weight. Carrying it correctly means two things at once: shoulders down, humble, and grip firm, responsible. Many of us stand on scaffolding paid for by strangers, sewer crews, midwives, union organizers, researchers who spent nights with microscopes and migraines, teachers who put books into small storms of children. Gratitude without action is a lullaby. Action without gratitude becomes a demand. He chooses both. Thank you, and therefore I will help keep this alive. If time travelers ever come, he would not envy anyone going back to medieval streets. The cobbles are hard on ankles and the air is crowded with uninvited things. But he would ask the travelers to return with one favor: bring back a clearer mirror. Not to scold, but to calibrate. Knowing how far we have come is the beginning of knowing how far we may still fall if we nap through our responsibilities. A ledger of today, debts we can pay forward. To water. Keep it clean at the sink and at the ballot. Learn which river has your name in its map. To food, waste less. Honor seasons where possible. Support the hands that harvest. To medicine, defend evidence, fund the quiet work. Separate cures from rumors with kindness. To labor. Remember that convenience is a person's schedule. Tip well, advocate better. To rights. Treat them as tools to be used and sharpened, not trophies to be displayed and forgotten. To the commons. Pick up trash that is not yours, because the green is practical vows. Small vows win. He writes 3 sentences on a card and tucks it behind the bills. Maintain one public thing each month. Bench. Book, birdbath, or budget line. Tell 2 stories fully. Beauty and cost. Craft and consequence. Keep one ritual that returns the day to itself. Lamp at dusk, walk after rain. 4 deep breaths before speaking the difficult sentence: gratitude in action. Teeth. Sheets and taps. Tonight, when he brushes his teeth, he remembers mouths that never recovered from bread ground with stone grit. He thanks the absurd luxury of fluoride. When he slides between clean sheets, he honors the washer, the weaver, the engineer, and the long genealogy of soap. When he turns a tap and cold, obedient water arrives, he salutes the buried city, the quiet empire of valves, pipes, chlorinators, and people who check them so others can sleep. What preserve really means: not clinging to the past, but protecting the present from becoming the past at its worst. Preserve standards, not just artifacts. Preserve fairness even when no festival banner is unfurled. Preserve institutions by fixing them while they still work. The opposite of decay is not nostalgia. It is stewardship, extending the circle, who still lives precariously. He thinks of places where water is still a negotiation, where clinics are far and skepticism is nearer, where a paycheck collapses if a bus is late. The medieval is not gone. It is just badly distributed. Extending comfort is not charity. It is preventive maintenance for civilization. Fewer emergencies, fewer excuses to build harder walls. On fear, using it gently. History can frighten. Use the fear like a kitchen knife. Point down, cut away from yourself, keep it sharp enough to be safe. Fear that guides action is caution. Fear that freezes is theater. He chooses a safety that looks like neighbors knowing each other's names. What to teach? Tools for citizens, not only for workers. A child who learns to boil water, mend a seam, read a budget, and apologize without performance is armored against several centuries at once. Equip the next ones for pandemics of rumor, for famines of attention, for sieges of distraction. Teach them to spot ladders disguised as cages and cages disguised as ladders. Mercy is infrastructure. Hospitals are mercy poured into architecture. Schools are mercy bound into calendars. Libraries are mercy on shelves. He adds one more: neighbors who check in, mercy on foot. Build these and you can survive a few bad kings, several foolish fashions, and more than one unlucky season. 3 questions to carry. What am I maintaining that someone else might not notice? Whose costs am I forgetting when I enjoy this convenience? How can I make one right more usable for the person with the least time? He does not need perfect answers. He needs recurring ones. A closing image, bells and pages. Somewhere, a bell keeps time for a room of tired hands. Somewhere, a page keeps time for a mind that has run ahead of itself. He imagines joining their duet, living at a tempo that holds gratitude and resolve in the same measure, slow enough to notice, strong enough to last. So tonight, if you brush your teeth, sleep between clean sheets, turn on clean water, pause for a small, unspectacular thank you. You cannot change the past. No one should have to live it again. But you can appreciate the present until it becomes a future softer than the one you were handed. The fan hums. The lamp learns to be a moon. Outside pipes sing under the street and the city's hidden monasteries. Labs, plants, little offices with coffee rings on the forms keep their gentle vigil. Breathe. The hard world is real. The kinder one is built, one ordinary habit at a time.